2001 was a year of transition for The Flash.
The beginning of the year would coincide with the end of writer Mark Waid's run on the book. Waid spent much of his run positioning Wally West into fully embracing the legacy of Barry Allen. West would eventually reveal his identity to the public and marry longtime girlfriend Linda Park. Waid would also introduce the concept of the Speed Force, an extra-dimensional, force that connected the speedsters of the DC Universe.
Into the writer's chair would step Geoff Johns, who came to DC Comics after a stint as a production assistant for director Richard Donner.
Johns would draw on inspiration from his hometown of Detroit by making the Flash a hero of the people, a regular working schmo instead of an alien, a god, or a billionaire. He would also set about bringing the Flash's vaunted rogues gallery back to prominence.
This would also include the introduction of new rogues for the Flash to square off against, and that's exactly what Geoff Johns did in his first story arc, which is what we're looking at today. This is The Flash. Blood Will Run.
Wally and Linda take in a Keystone Combine's hockey game. He's having trouble focusing on the action as he spotted Leonard Snart, aka Captain Cold, amongst the crowd. None of it really matters as he's soon approached by a police officer about a shootout at a local car dealership. Flash zips over to the dealership to halt a hail of bullets from hitting the officers on scene. However, the criminal has already been wrapped up by someone from Wally's past. Magenta has returned.
Frances Kane was Wally West's teenage girlfriend who discovered that she had magnetic-based superpowers. At Wally's behest, Frances took on the name Magenta and became a superhero, working frequently with the Teen Titans. Unfortunately, the overall stress of superhero work, coupled with the stress from a nasty breakup with Wally, caused Frances to develop a separate personality with homicidal tendencies. The more Frances used her powers, the stronger this darker personality, also called Magenta, became.
Further complicating matters, Wally discovers that one of the officers on scene is another ex-girlfriend, Julie Jackham. The two try to question Magenta, who's trying to be good again, when the offender breaks free. The woman says that all of this has been for the Flash, as she sets them up the bomb. Wally races to contain the explosion using a large set of tires to try to absorb it. In doing so, he turns up something else, a dead body. While the group wait for the homicide detectives to arrive, they briefly turn their attention to a union dispute at an auto plant. The union is led by another rogue attempting to go straight named Goldface. Also, Magenta is taken into custody due to outstanding warrants from her previous escapades. She goes peacefully, trying to point out that her darker half is under control. After everything, Julie returns home to check in on her son, Josh. The baby is sleeping, but the peace is short-lived as a man wielding a knife in the shape of a lightning bolt emerges. Before she can get to her gun, the man plunges the knife deep into Julie's back. The hilt of the knife begins to glow as it's twisted into Julie's spine. Josh cries as the man leaves Julie behind to bleed to death. The next day, the Flash visits the police station, where Detective Jared Murillo informs him that there are more bodies that have been discovered. The victims all have one thing in common. They're all people the Flash had saved earlier in their lives. Someone is undoing all of Wally's heroics. Flash volunteers to visit all of the crime scenes to try to collect evidence after speed reading a book on forensic science. It's then that he notices the first and newest name on the list, Julie Jackham. Wally arrives at Julie's apartment at the same time as her partner, Fred Kyer. After a brief commotion, Kyer realizes what has happened and the Flash comforts the veteran officer.
Fred Kyer's first partner on the Keystone City Police Force was Joe Jackham, Julie's grandfather, and that's why he became her partner as sort of a tribute to her grandfather.
Elsewhere in Keystone City, a large group of people is addressed by some type of cult leader. The speaker talks about having a vision that allowed him to cheat death. He then said about raising a group that would allow others the same gifts and even resurrect the dead as well. Case in point being the leader's wife. Lightning begins to flicker in everyone's eyes as the group thanks their savior, the Flash. Wally goes to visit with Magenta, who's still in custody. He apologizes for everything he did that led her to here. She says everything's okay as lightning begins to crackle in her eyes. She then tosses the Flash through a wall and gives a name to the killers. Cicada.
Cicada is not only the name of the cult, but also its leader, who was born David Hirsch. After the death of his wife, Hirsch attempted to kill himself by getting intentionally struck by lightning. Instead, this gave him the ability to draw life energy from other beings. The cult believes that the people the Flash saved were going to die anyway, so their deaths in the long run are meaningless and they can just absorb their life energy at will.
Magenta then locates a container with a lightning bolt-shaped key inside and takes off with the Flash. Linda sees the two flying away and places a call to Jesse Quick. Unfortunately, Wally's fellow speedster is busy with a problem in Pittsburgh. Meanwhile, Magenta has taken the Flash back to Cicada, who places him in a special bubble attuned to his magnetic field. Cicada then steps forward and begins explaining everything to the Flash after sacrificing another follower. The cult leader's plan is to use Wally's life force to resurrect his wife, Elizabeth. Meanwhile, Detective Murillo and Officer Kyer take off trying to locate where the Flash is being held. The two personalities clash along the way, but they need each other, as Murillo is the only one with a vehicle, and Kyer actually has a magnetic compass which they can use to track Magenta's magnetism. Also, Linda Park West has returned home to find Magenta has set her up the bomb. Thankfully, Jesse Quick arrives to save Linda from the explosion. The two then spot one of Cicada's followers trying to get away, but he kills himself with a lightning dagger before they can turn up anything. Back with the Flash, Cicada plunges one of his daggers into the hero's chest and begins drawing not only Wally's life force, but the speed force as well. The energy is then transferred into a coffin containing Elizabeth's remains. She's fully revived, but it's not a happy reunion. She rebuffs Cicada and reveals the truth. Contrary to what he claimed, Elizabeth didn't die. She was strangled to death by her husband. He kisses her and drains her new life force, claiming it all to be lies. It's then that Kyer and Murillo arrive, and the Flash uses this distraction to alter his magnetic field to match Magenta's. This causes a feedback loop that takes her out and frees him. Murillo confronts Cicada, who cuts him with the dagger before the Flash grabs him. Flash then uses the Speed Force to overload Cicada, causing more feedback, which takes out Cicada's followers, save for Magenta, who has escaped. Cicada is left powerless. Afterwards, Wally and Linda survey the wreckage of their home. Wally isn't sure about rebuilding, feeling he's better off serving Keystone City by living in it. Elsewhere, Detective Murillo cuts himself shaving, only for it to heal almost instantly. Finally, Officer Kyer elects to take in Julie's son Josh. It's the least he could do. As the baby is put to bed, yellow lightning begins to crackle in his eyes.
This does end Cicada's involvement in this story, but we're still not quite finished yet.
Wally and Linda move into a new penthouse apartment in Keystone City. It's not all wine and roses, though, as Linda's parents are coming for dinner. Wally tries to focus on the Combine's New Jersey Devils game on TV as his father-in-law drones on. It's then that he notices the game has been interrupted by the villain known as Tar Pit. Wally goes into flash mode and races to the arena as Scott Stevens and Scott Niedermeyer attempt to cross-check the being of molten tar to little effect. Flash isn't able to do much more when assistance comes from an unlikely source. Captain Cold is a tiny bit peeved that the game got halted. The distraction is enough for Flash to utilize a nearby street cleaner to neutralize Tar Pit with the acidic-based cleaning fluid. Tar Pit's not completely destroyed, so Flash turns over the villain's remains to Detective Murillo. Murillo also informs the Flash that he and Kyer worked so well together that the higher-ups have made the two partners from now on, even though they still hate each other. Wally goes looking for Cold, only to find the villain has fled the scene, leaving behind his date from the Arm Candy escort service.
That's not a joke. The woman really does state that she's a prostitute.
Officer Kyer then gets a call from his wife about Josh. Something's going on and his whole bedroom is full of yellow lightning. The next day at Julie Jackham's funeral, Kyer talks with Wally and Linda. The yellow lightning is still crackling in Josh's eyes. Kyer and his wife believe this to be the Speed Force. Josh might be Wally's son. Linda tries to keep calm as the group heads back to the police station. The trip gets interrupted by a sudden hailstorm. Josh has another lightning tantrum as sleet and fog are soon added to the mix. Wally knows what's going on as the weather wizard has made his presence known.
Mark Martin used his brother Clyde's research into meteorology to develop a wand that was capable of altering the weather in the nearby vicinity. Later, Martin would have his powers expanded by a demon named Neuron so that he wouldn't need the wand at all.
Flash tries to leap into action only to get caught up in a tornado. Weather Wizard then begins going after the others, chasing them into a nearby church. Mrs. Kyer gives Linda the baby, who struggles as she's never held a baby before. It's then that Weather Wizard comes crashing through and demands that Linda hand over his son. Flash manages to break free of the tornado and goes after Weather Wizard as Martin goes on to explain that he happened on Julie Jackham in a bar shortly after her breakup with the Flash. Flash tries to negate the wizard's wand, forgetting that he doesn't really need the item anymore. Martin continues that he and Julie had a one-night stand and that he didn't even know that Josh existed until a woman tipped him off about it.
Okay, so this woman who's manipulating the Weather Wizard is also manipulating several other criminals, including Goldface, the union boss from earlier, not to mention a serial killer named Murmur, who actually intentionally stitched his mouth shut to keep himself from gloating about his crimes. This is seed planted for some later stories down the line.
Because Josh has apparently inherited his father's weather manipulation powers, Weather Wizard intends to have the boy dissected to figure out what's going on. However, when he grabs the child, the Flash rushes in, grabs Josh, and knocks the wand out of Martin's hand. Before anything else can happen, Weather Wizard is knocked out by another rogue, the Mirror Master. The two's mysterious mutual director has kicked the Weather Wizard out of the group. With it appearing that the rogues are convalescing once more, Flash and Detective Murillo lobby the Keystone City higher-ups to bring in an FBI profiler. One is called, and he sets out looking for a fresh start after his recent divorce. Upon arrival at the Keystone City Police Department, Hunter Zolomon is introduced to the Flash.
And if you remember the last time I reviewed a Flash story on this show, you know how Hunter Zolomon's story turns out.
Almost immediately, Zolomon is put on the case involving the aforementioned Murmur. Zolomon points out that he had a regular gig at a Keystone City radio station. At the scene, the group finds that Murmur has had some help in the form of Magenta and Girder. All three rogues bring up a similar scenario to Weather Wizard, mentioning a mysterious woman being behind the events. Magenta then knocks out Flash, while Girder tosses the detective out a window. Wally elects to go after his friends and save them, while the villains escape with Mirror Master's aid. Heck of a first day for Hunter Zolomon.
And that concludes The Flash, Blood Will Run. How was it? Well, on the plus side, I really think there's some good storytelling in this. I like the way Cicada is introduced. He comes across as threatening and menacing, and it always seems like he could come back for more, that the story is not quite done there. And one of the best part of Geoff Johns' entire run on The Flash was the idea of Wally trying to balance his public persona of The Flash while still trying to maintain a status quo relationship with Linda. And while it's in its infancy here, it still comes across as being pretty well. And all of this is coupled with some great artwork from Scott Collins. Also, the whole second part of the story with the Weather Wizard and the baby and everything in that aspect, it works pretty well. It doesn't feel tacked on too much. It's not filler material at all. Well, for the most part it isn't. Unfortunately, one of the drawbacks I would have to say is the Hunter Zolomon story at the end of that. It really feels like it should be in the next volume for this. Now, most of the Geoff Johns run stuff is now collected in these big omnibus editions, so it probably does flow a little bit well, but here it just feels a little tacked on and unnecessary. Also, the character of Julie Jackham is a bit of a troubling point. Like, when I first read this story, I thought that they had like this big backstory and big history, and that's not the case. This was basically her debut story. This was a character created to be killed. Just, again, it kind of leaves me feeling a little, yeah, so while this isn't bad, it's certainly a more entertaining Flash story, and like I said, there are omnibus editions of Geoff Johns' run on The Flash. I would probably recommend getting that and getting a whole grand, like I said, a grand epic in there, for lack of a better term. So this is still really good, though. If you could get this, get it. I'm going to give The Flash, Blood Will Run, a B. And with that, let's see what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Hey guys, got a request for the show? Check out my Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcatproductions. And if you like the video, give it a like, share it, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.